What is the true price of ambition? What secrets fester behind the polished doors of success? They say a dog is a man's best friend. But what happens when that friendship demands the ultimate sacrifice? What you are about to hear is a tale so disturbing, it will crawl under your skin and make a home there. It's a story that will make you look twice at the person who signs your paycheck. Before we descend into this madness, do me a favor. Reach down and click that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss the darkness we're about to unleash together. Now, turn down the lights and prepare yourself for a feast of fear. The story I'm about to tell you is a horrifying 1.1 that will make you question the very nature of humanity. It is a tale of a company boss, his beautiful female employee, and a loyal canine with a peculiar appetite. The first time Alara met Mr. Alistair Blackwood, she felt a tremor of something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was more like the instinctive stillness of a fawn that senses a predator nearby, a primal hum of caution that vibrated just beneath her skin. Blackwood Tower was a monument to modern avarice, a shard of obsidian and chrome that pierced the London skyline, and Alistair Blackwood was its undisputed king. He was a man sculpted from ambition and old money, with a face that belonged on a Roman coin, all sharp angles, a strong jaw, and eyes the color of a stormy sea. They were eyes that didn't just look at you. They appraised, dissected, and filed you away. When he smiled, it was a masterpiece of control, a brief, dazzling flash of white that never quite reached those turbulent eyes. Alara had clawed her way into Blackwood Industries, her resume a polished testament to sleepless nights and a relentless drive to escape the suffocating quiet of her provincial hometown. She started in the marketing department, a small cog in a vast, glittering machine. But she was smart, devastatingly so, and her ideas were fresh, audacious. It didn't take long for her work to catch the eye of the man at the top. The promotion came on a Tuesday. It wasn't just a step up, it was a quantum leap. She was to be his new executive assistant, a position that came with a salary that made her head spin and an office on the 50th floor, adjacent to God himself. The previous assistant, a mousy woman named Beatrice, had apparently left for health reasons. The office gossip mill whispered, her departure as sudden and silent as a ghost. "Miss Hayes," Blackwood had said, his voice a low, sonorous purr that seemed to coat the very air in his cavernous office. The room was a study in minimalist opulence, a single massive desk of polished mahogany, a wall of glass offering a god's-eye view of the city, and a disquieting lack of personal effects, save for a large, exquisitely detailed bronze statue of a Cerberus on a side table. "Your work is impressive. You possess a rare clarity of thought. I require that clarity by my side." Alara, overwhelmed, had managed to stammer, "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. I won't let you down." His smile was that same controlled, brilliant thing. "I know you won't." The first few weeks were a blur of spreadsheets, international calls, and a schedule that was as demanding as it was exhilarating. Alara thrived on the pressure. She was a natural organizer, a seamless extension of Blackwood's will. She anticipated his needs before he voiced them, had his coffee, black, 2 sugars, on his desk before he arrived, and managed his impenetrable fortress of a schedule with a grace that belied the stress. It was during the second week that she met Hannibal. She had stayed late, finalizing the logistics for a merger with a German tech firm. The office was silent, the usual thrum of activity replaced by the quiet hum of the building's life support. As she walked past Blackwood's office, she heard a low sound, a soft thump-thump-thump. Hesitantly, she pushed the heavy oak door open a crack. Alistair Blackwood was on the floor, his suit jacket discarded, his tie loosened, and with him was the most magnificent and terrifying dog she had ever seen. It was a cane corso, a beast of rippling black muscle, its coat so dark it seemed to drink the light. Its head was massive, its jowls loose, and its eyes, a startling amber, were fixed on its master with an unnerving, intelligent devotion. The sound was its tail, thick as a man's wrist, thudding against the plush Persian rug. Blackwood was stroking the dog's enormous head, murmuring to it in a low, intimate tone she couldn't quite catch. He looked up, his stormy eyes locking onto hers. For a split second, she saw something raw in them, something unguarded and ancient. Then the mask of the CEO slipped back into place. "Miss Hayes," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Working late, I see. Commendable." "I'm sorry to intrude, sir," she said, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Nonsense. Come in. Meet Hannibal." He patted the dog's flank. "My most loyal associate." Alara stepped cautiously into the room. The dog, Hannibal, didn't growl or bark. It simply watched her, its amber eyes unblinking, its massive chest rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm. The air around it seemed to crackle with contained power. "He's not beautiful," she managed, and she meant it. There was a terrible, brutal beauty to the animal. "He is perfection," Blackwood corrected gently. "Loyalty, strength, and an uncomplicated nature. Qualities I find increasingly rare in your species." He rose to his feet in one fluid movement. "He has a discerning palate. He doesn't take to everyone." Over the next few months, Alara became a fixture in Blackwood's inner sanctum. She saw a side of him that few others did. The ruthless corporate raider was also a man who spoke to his dog in soft, almost loving tones. He was demanding, exacting, and his temper could be glacial, but he was also, in his own way, a brilliant mentor. He sharpened her mind, honed her instincts, and pushed her to be better, faster, smarter. The gilded cage of her new life was intoxicating. The money, the clothes, the respect. She moved into a sleek apartment in Canary Wharf, her reflection staring back at her from the floor-to-ceiling windows, a stranger in a designer suit. She had left her old life so far behind it felt like a dream. But there were oddities. Small, dissonant notes in the symphony of her success. There was the matter of Hannibal's food. Blackwood was fastidious about it. Every day, at precisely 1 p.m., a special delivery would arrive from a butcher in a discreet, unmarked van. It wasn't dog food, not the kind that came in a bag. It was fresh, vacuum-sealed packages of raw meat, deep red and marbled with fat. Blackwood himself would take the delivery, never letting Alara or any other staff member handle it. He kept a dedicated, high-end refrigerator in a small anteroom connected to his office, just for Hannibal's meals. Once, a package had leaked, a small smear of blood-red liquid on the pristine marble floor. Alara had moved to clean it up, but Blackwood had stopped her, his voice uncharacteristically sharp. "Leave it, Miss Hayes. I'll take care of it." His eyes had a glint in them she had never seen before, a possessive, almost feral light. She had retreated, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. Then there were the disappearances. It was a running joke in the lower echelons of Blackwood Industries, the high turnover rate for certain positions. A junior analyst who had made a costly error on a quarterly report. A rival executive from another department who had been a little too vocal in his opposition to one of Blackwood's projects. A security guard who had been found sleeping on the job. They didn't just get fired, they vanished. One day they were there, the next, their desks were cleared, their security passes deactivated, their existence seemingly erased from the corporate memory. The official explanation was always plausible: a sudden resignation, a family emergency, a transfer to a non-existent overseas branch. But the rumors persisted, whispered in hushed tones by the water cooler, of Blackwood's clean-up crew. Alara tried to ignore it. It was the cutthroat world of high finance, she told herself. People came and went. It was none of her business. Her business was to be efficient, loyal, and indispensable to Alistair Blackwood. Her beauty had not gone unnoticed by him. She was tall and willowy, with hair the color of spun gold and eyes the shade of a summer sky. Men had always looked at her, but Blackwood's gaze was different. It was proprietary. It was the look of a collector admiring a prized acquisition. He would compliment her on a dress, the scent of her perfume, the way a strand of her hair caught the light. The compliments were always delivered with that cool, detached smile, but they made her skin prickle. He started requesting her presence at after-hours events. Dinners with investors, charity galas, opera nights. "You are an asset, Miss Hayes," he'd said. "Your elegance and intelligence reflect well on the company." At these events, he was the perfect gentleman, attentive and charming. He would place a hand on the small of her back to guide her through a crowd, the touch both fleeting and possessive. She found herself playing a part, the poised, brilliant assistant to the powerful CEO. It was a role she was good at, but it felt increasingly like a costume she couldn't take off. The lines began to blur, the professional and the personal. One evening, after a particularly grueling week of negotiations, he had dismissed his driver and offered to take her home himself. His car was a Bentley, a silent, black beast that glided through the rain-slicked London streets. The interior smelled of rich leather and his expensive cologne. "You look tired, Alara," he said, using her first name for the first time outside of a social setting. The sound of it in his deep voice was both a caress and a command. "It's been a long week, Mr. Blackwood," she replied, keeping her tone formal. "Alistair," he corrected softly. "When it is just the two of us, you may call me Alistair." He didn't take her straight home. Instead, he drove to a quiet, ridiculously expensive restaurant overlooking the Thames. The maitre d' greeted him with a deference usually reserved for royalty. They were seated at a secluded table, the city lights twinkling like a fallen constellation outside the window. The conversation was different that night. He asked about her family, her childhood, her dreams. He spoke of his own loneliness, the isolation of being at the top. He painted a picture of himself as a man burdened by his own genius, a solitary king in his glass tower. "It is a rare thing," he said, his stormy eyes fixed on her, "to find someone who understands, someone who is not intimidated by power, but drawn to it. Someone like you." Alara felt a dangerous, intoxicating pull. This was the man who held her future in his hands, and he was showing her a glimpse of the man behind the mask. A part of her, the ambitious girl from the small town, was flattered, captivated. But another part, the fawn that had sensed the predator on that first day, was screaming a silent warning. As he drove her home to her sterile, high-rise apartment, he stopped the car. He didn't try to kiss her or even touch her. He just looked at her, his gaze intense, searching. "You have a beautiful complexion, Alara," he said, his voice a low murmur. "So vibrant, full of life." The compliment was so strange, so specific, that it sent a chill down her spine. It wasn't the way a man complimented a woman he was attracted to. It was the way a connoisseur might comment on a piece of fruit, or a butcher on a prime cut of meat. She mumbled a thank you and quickly got out of the car. As she watched the Bentley's red taillights disappear into the night, she wrapped her arms around herself, feeling suddenly cold, exposed. The incident that truly cracked the polished veneer of her reality happened a month later. It was a Friday afternoon. Blackwood was in a series of back-to-back meetings, and Alara was holding down the fort. A courier arrived with an urgent, confidential package for Blackwood. It was from one of his more discreet legal firms. As she signed for it, the courier, a harried-looking young man, stumbled, and the package slipped from his grasp. It fell to the floor, and a small Ziploc bag slid out from the partially opened flap. Inside the bag was a single, manicured human fingernail, painted a shade of delicate pearlescent pink. Alara stared at it, her blood turning to ice. She recognized the shade. It was the same one worn by Chloe, a pretty, vivacious intern from the finance department. An intern who had been fired 2 days prior for supposedly leaking confidential information. An intern who no one had heard from since. Her hands shaking, Alara quickly scooped up the bag and the package, shoving them back into the courier's hands and sending him on his way with a terse nod. She sank into her chair, her mind racing. Could be a coincidence. A sick joke. There had to be a rational explanation, but the image was seared into her brain. The pristine pink nail, severed and sterile in its plastic bag. She thought of the whispers, the disappearances, the junior analyst, the rival executive, the security guard, Chloe. She thought of the unmarked van from the butcher, the vacuum-sealed packages of deep red meat. She thought of Hannibal, the magnificent, terrifying beast with the discerning palate. And she thought of Alistair Blackwood's strange, chilling words. You have a beautiful complexion, Elara. So vibrant. Full of life. The pieces began to click into place, forming a picture so monstrous, so utterly insane, that her mind recoiled from it. No, it wasn't possible. She was letting her imagination run wild. This was London in the 21st century, not some gothic horror novel. But the fear, once it took root, was a voracious, creeping vine. It tightened around her chest, making it hard to breathe. Suddenly, the 50th floor felt less like the pinnacle of success and more like the top of a sacrificial altar. The panoramic view of the city no longer looked beautiful. It looked like a long, long way to fall. When Blackwood returned from his meetings, he seemed to be in a particularly good mood. He was humming a piece of classical music she didn't recognize, a predatory little tune. Excellent work today, Elara, he said, pausing by her desk. He reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. His fingers were cold, like marble. You are truly becoming indispensable. She forced a smile, her face feeling stiff and unnatural. Thank you, sir. Alistair, he reminded her, his own smile widening. Now I have a special task for you. I'm hosting a small, private dinner party at my home this weekend. Just a few very important associates. And I would be honored if you would act as my hostess. Her stomach plunged. His home, place she had never been. A place where, she now suspected, Hannibal kept his special refrigerator. Of course, Alistair, she heard herself say, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Wonderful, he purred. I'll have my driver pick you up at 7 on Saturday. Wear something stunning. He turned and walked into his office, closing the door behind him. A moment later, she heard the soft thump-thump-thump of Hannibal's tail against the floor, a sound of happy, eager anticipation. Elara stared at the closed door, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The gilded cage had slammed shut, and she was trapped inside with the monster. The monster who saw her not as a person, but as an asset, a prize, and perhaps, she thought with a surge of pure, unadulterated terror, as a future meal for his most loyal associate. The vibrant, life-filled meal he had already complimented. The horrifying tale had just begun, and she was its unwilling, terrified protagonist. The question was no longer how she had climbed so high, but whether she would ever make it down alive. The drive to Alistair Blackwood's home was a journey into another world. The Bentley, silent and funereal, left the glittering steel and glass heart of London behind, gliding through progressively quieter, more opulent suburbs until it reached the secluded, wooded enclave of Hampstead. Ancient trees, heavy with the secrets of centuries, formed a dense canopy over the narrow, winding lanes. The houses here were not houses. They were estates, hidden behind high stone walls and wrought iron gates, their privacy as fiercely guarded as their wealth. Blackwood's residence was at the end of a long, private drive, a foreboding structure of dark brick and imposing Georgian architecture. It was less a home and more a mausoleum, surrounded by acres of manicured, unnaturally perfect lawns that seemed to swallow the evening light. As Elara stepped out of the car, the air felt different, cooler, heavier, and scented with damp earth and something else, something faintly, cloyingly metallic. The front door, a massive slab of black-painted oak, was opened by a butler who moved with the silent, spectral efficiency of a ghost. He was a tall, skeletal man with a face devoid of all expression. His name, she would learn, was Finch. He led her through a cavernous, marble-floored hall where the only sound was the echo of her own heels, a frantic, clicking counterpoint to her racing heart. The interior was much like Blackwood's office, a testament to cold, minimalist wealth. The art on the walls was modern and abstract, splashes of angry color on vast white canvases. The furniture was sparse, architectural, and looked profoundly uncomfortable. There was no warmth here, no sign of a life lived, only of a life curated. And everywhere there was the dog motif. The bronze Cerberus from his office had a larger, more menacing twin guarding the grand staircase. The door knockers were snarling wolf heads. Even the andirons in the massive, unlit fireplace were shaped like sleek, predatory hounds. It was a temple dedicated to the canine, or perhaps to the beast within the man. Blackwood was waiting for her in the drawing room. A vast, shadowy space dominated by a floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the dark, brooding gardens. He was standing with his back to her, a glass of dark red wine in his hand, and Hannibal was seated at his feet, a silent obsidian statue. He turned as she entered, and his smile was a slow, deliberate thing. He was dressed in a velvet smoking jacket the color of dried blood. "Alara," he said, his voice a low caress that slid over her skin like a cold snake. "You look exquisite." She was wearing a simple, elegant black dress, the something stunning he had requested. Now, under his appraising gaze, she felt less like a guest and more like an offering. The dress felt flimsy, a pathetic defense against the predatory gleam in his eyes. "Thank you, Alistair. Your home is impressive," she said, her voice sounding thin and reedy to her own ears. "It serves its purpose," he replied, taking a slow sip of his wine. "Privacy is the ultimate luxury." He gestured towards the bar. "Can I offer you a drink? A glass of this excellent Bordeaux, perhaps? It has a wonderfully full-bodied character." She declined, asking for a glass of water instead. She needed her wits about her. Every nerve ending she possessed was screaming at her, a deafening chorus of danger. The other guests arrived shortly after. There were only two of them, a man and a woman, both in their late 50s. The man, a portly individual named Silas Croft, was a shipping magnate with a reputation for ruthless business practices and a face that seemed permanently flushed with excess. The woman, Serafina Dubois, was a chic, rail-thin art dealer from Paris, her eyes as sharp and cold as chips of ice. They greeted Blackwood with a familiarity that spoke of a long and profitable association, an unholy trinity of power brokers. They paid little attention to Alara, dismissing her as mere decoration, the hostess as Blackwood had so clinically put it. They spoke of mergers and acquisitions, of hostile takeovers and political machinations. Their conversation a casual, immoral ballet of greed. Alara stood by, a ghost at the feast, refilling drinks, forcing smiles, and feeling the invisible walls of the trap closing in around her. Hannibal remained a constant, silent presence, never leaving Blackwood's side. The dog didn't beg or whine. It simply watched, its unervingly intelligent amber eyes moving from guest to guest, as if assessing them. When Silas Croft had laughed a little too loudly, a low, almost inaudible rumble had vibrated from the cane corso's chest, a warning that was instantly heeded. Dinner was announced by the spectral Finch. The dining room was even more imposing than the drawing room. A long, polished mahogany table, big enough to seat 20, was set for only 4. A single, elaborate silver candelabra provided the only light, casting long, dancing shadows that made the room feel alive and menacing. The first course was served. It was a tranche of some kind, dark and rich. Alara, her appetite gone, pushed the food around her plate with her fork. "Not hungry, my dear?" Blackwood asked, his eyes missing nothing. "It's delicious," she lied. "I'm just a little overwhelmed by the grandeur of it all." Silas Croft let out a wheezing chuckle. "Alistair has a taste for the finer things, that's for certain, in business and in life." He winked at Blackwood, a lewd, conspiratorial gesture. The main course arrived. It was a roast, brought to the table on a large silver platter by Finch. It was a cut of meat Alara didn't recognize, cooked to a perfect, bloody rare. It was presented with an artistry that was almost surgical. As Blackwood began to carve, the metallic, coppery smell she had noticed outside now filled the room, thick and cloying. "Our host is not only a titan of industry but a connoisseur of rare delicacies," Serafina commented, her Parisian accent sharp and precise. "He has a butcher who sources the most exclusive cuts." Blackwood smiled his cold, controlled smile. "One must cultivate unique tastes to appreciate the rarity of true quality." He placed a slice of the glistening red meat onto Alara's plate. You must try this, Alara. It's an experience. She looked down at the meat, at the crimson juices pooling on the white porcelain. She thought of the unmarked van. She thought of Chloe's pink fingernail. She thought of the empty desks at Blackwood Industries. A wave of nausea so profound, so visceral, washed over her that she thought she was going to be sick. The room swam before her eyes. Are you quite well, my dear? Blackwood's voice was laced with a chilling, feigned concern. I think I need some air, she stammered, pushing her chair back. Of course. The French doors at the end of the hall lead to the terrace. She fled the room, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She half ran down the hall, fumbling with the heavy brass handle of the doors, and stumbled out into the cold night air. The terrace was a wide stone expanse overlooking the sprawling, dark gardens. The moon was a sickly sliver in the sky, offering little light. She leaned against the cold stone balustrade, gulping in the air, trying to fight down the bile rising in her throat. It wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was a certainty, a truth so grotesque it defied reason. The meat on that table.it was human. Chloe, the junior analyst, the security guard, they weren't just gone. They had been processed, sourced by Alistair's exclusive butcher, served up at a private dinner party for his soulless associates. Her mind reeled. This wasn't just murder. This was a perverse, ritualistic cannibalism, a celebration of their own predatory nature. They weren't just consuming the flesh of their victims. They were consuming their failure, their weakness, their inferiority. And Hannibal, the special deliveries, the discerning palate, oh God, the dog. Blackwood wasn't just feeding his dog. He was feeding it the remains of his enemies, the scraps from his table. He had turned his pet into an accomplice, a living, breathing disposal unit for his atrocities. The horror of it was absolute, a perfect, seamless circle of depravity. She had to get out. She had to run. She looked over the balustrade. It was at least a 20-foot drop to the dark lawn below. The estate was surrounded by high walls. Her phone was in her purse, back in the drawing room. She was utterly, completely trapped. Feeling better? Blackwood's voice came from the shadows behind her. She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. He was standing in the doorway, a silhouette against the dim light of the hall. Yes, thank you, she said, trying to keep her voice from trembling. Just a momentary dizzy spell. The richness of the meal can be overpowering for the uninitiated, he said, stepping out onto the terrace. He moved with a predator's silent grace. But one acquires a taste for it. He walked to her side, standing unervingly close. She could smell the wine on his breath, and beneath it, the faint, sickening scent of the meat he had just consumed. You're shivering, he observed. He took off his velvet smoking jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It was heavy and warm from his body. The intimacy of the gesture was terrifying. Felt like he was marking her, claiming her. There. Better? Yes, she whispered. He looked out over the dark expanse of his property. I've worked very hard to build this world, Alara. A world where I make the rules, where I decide who is valuable and who is expendable. His gaze shifted from the garden to her face. His stormy eyes seemed to glow in the darkness. I brought you here for a reason. Croft and Dubois. They are old news. Powerful, yes, but unimaginative. They are dinosaurs. I am looking for a partner, a queen to share my throne, someone with beauty, intelligence, and a capacity for understanding. He reached out and traced a finger along her jawline. His touch was icy cold. You have that capacity, don't you, Alara? You see the world for what it is, a brutal, glorious hunt. There are predators and there is prey. There is no in-between. This was it, the offer. The invitation to join his circle of monsters. Her mind raced, searching for an escape, a way to play for time. I don't know what you mean, she said, her voice a fragile thread. His smile was a slash of white in the darkness. Oh, I think you do. I saw the look on your face in the dining room. the dawning comprehension, the beautiful, exquisite horror. You know what we were eating, and you know it is the ultimate expression of power. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. To take everything from your rivals. Not just their money, their position, their life, but their very substance. To incorporate it into your own being. It's transcendent. He was insane. A philosopher king of cannibalism. A monster cloaked in a bespoke suit. And Hannibal, he continued, a note of genuine affection in his voice. He understands. He is the purest predator I know. No guilt. No morality, only instinct and loyalty. He partakes of the feast. He keeps the circle clean. There is no waste in my world, Alara. Everything and everyone has a purpose. He wanted her to say yes. He wanted her to embrace his nightmare world. And she knew, with a chilling certainty, that the wrong answer would mean she would be the next rare delicacy to be sourced by his butcher. Her beautiful, vibrant complexion would become just another cut of meat, destined for the dinner table or the dog bowl. She had to be smart. She had to be a predator just like him. She looked up at him, meeting his gaze. She forced herself not to flinch. She allowed a slow, calculated smile to form on her lips. Transcendent, she repeated his word, her voice a soft, breathy whisper. I've never thought of it that way before. A flicker of surprise, of triumph, crossed his face. I knew you would understand, he purred. He took her hand, his grip like iron. Come, let's rejoin our guests. And this time you will eat. You will partake in the feast. You will take your first step into my world. He led her back into the house, his hand holding hers in a grip that was both a promise and a threat. As she walked back towards the dining room, towards the plate of human flesh that awaited her, she knew she was no longer just fighting for her life. She was fighting for her soul. She had to play his game, wear the mask of a monster, and pray that she could find a way to escape before the mask became her face. The abattoir of elegance had claimed many victims, and she was determined not to be the next course. The hunt was on, and she had just become the most dangerous kind of prey, the kind that was pretending to be a predator. The walk back to the dining room was the longest of Alara's life. Blackwood's hand was a manacle around hers, his thumb stroking the back of her palm in a gesture that was meant to be possessive and reassuring, but felt like a spider tracing the lines of its web. She was the fly, and she had stopped struggling. For now, her mind was a maelstrom of terror and frantic calculation. The mask she had to wear was heavy, suffocating. She had to be a believable monster. She had to mirror the cold, predatory gleam in Alistair's eyes, to speak his language of immoral power. Survival depended on her performance. When they re-entered the dining room, Silas Croft and Seraphina Dubois looked up, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and cruel amusement. Alara's earlier flight had clearly been a source of entertainment. Ah, the little bird has returned to the nest, Croft wheezed, wiping a smear of grease from his thick lips with a linen napkin. Blackwood smiled, a king reclaiming his consort. Alara was simply overcome. The experience can be intense for the novice. He pulled out her chair, a gesture of mock chivalry, and guided her back to her seat. But she has a remarkable capacity for adaptation. Don't you, my dear? He was testing her, showcasing her for the others. She met his gaze, her heart hammering, and forced a cool, steady smile. One must adapt to appreciate rarity, she said, echoing his own words back at him. A flicker of genuine approval lit his stormy eyes. Seraphina raised a thin, skeptical eyebrow, but said nothing. The plate was still there, the slice of glistening red meat now cold. The coppery scent seemed to have intensified, a phantom of the life it once was. Eat, Blackwood commanded softly. It was not a request. This was the crucible, the point of no return. Her stomach churned with revulsion, but she picked up her knife and fork. Her hands were shaking so violently she could barely hold them. She pinned a small piece of the meat with her fork, the texture soft, yielding. She saw Chloe's smiling face, her pearlescent pink nails. She saw the empty desks, the ghosts of Blackwood Industries. She raised the fork to her lips, the smell making her gag. She had to do it. She put the meat in her mouth. The taste was indescribable. It was rich, gamey, and overwhelmingly metallic, like biting down on a mouthful of old coins. It was the taste of transgression, of the ultimate taboo. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and for a terrifying second, she thought she would faint. She forced herself to chew, to swallow, the morsel sliding down her throat like a stone. She took a slow sip of water, her throat burning. She looked up and met Blackwood's intense, waiting gaze. "Well?" he prompted. She let out a slow breath, composing her features into an expression of thoughtful consideration. "It's potent," she said, her voice a low, steady murmur. "It tastes of victory." Silas Croft let out a booming laugh, slapping the table with his meaty hand. "Victory? By God, Alistair, you found a good one. She's a natural." Blackwood's smile was triumphant. He had his queen. Alara had passed the test. She had joined the circle. She had taken a piece of another human being into her body and, in their twisted worldview, had absorbed their power. The revulsion she felt was a physical entity, a writhing thing in the pit of her stomach, but on the outside, she was calm. She was one of them. The rest of the dinner passed in a haze. They talked and laughed, their conversation peppered with the casual cruelty of gods discussing the fates of mortals. Alara said little, but when she did, she chose her words carefully, crafting a persona of a woman awakening to a new, thrilling world of power. She was a quick study. She learned their language. After the meal, they retired to a study for brandy and cigars. The room was lined with leather-bound books that looked as though they had never been opened. It was a stage set for power. Hannibal lay by the fireplace, his massive head on his paws, his amber eyes tracking Alara's every move. He knew, she thought. The dog knew she was an imposter. Her chance came when Croft and Du Bois began a heated discussion about a mutual rival. Blackwood was momentarily distracted, his back to her as he refilled their glasses. Feigning a need to use the powder room, Alara slipped out of the study. Finch, the spectral butler, materialized in the hall, his face as impassive as ever. He gave her directions in a monotone voice, his eyes like polished river stones, revealing nothing. Instead of going to the powder room, she made her way towards the back of the house, towards the kitchen. Her mind was racing. She needed proof. She needed a weapon, something she could use to bring this entire house of horrors down. Her phone was still in her purse, but even if she could get it, who would she call? What would she say? A CEO is serving his employees to his dinner guests? They would think she was insane. The kitchen was a vast, stainless steel affair, as cold and clinical as a morgue. Gleaming knives hung from magnetic strips, and industrial-sized ovens stood silent and menacing. She saw a door at the far end, a heavy, walk-in freezer door. She thought of Hannibal's special deliveries. This had to be it. Her heart pounded as she pulled the heavy handle. The door opened with a hiss of cold air. The light flickered on automatically, revealing a chilling sight. It was not a freezer, but a meticulously organized cold room, an abattoir in miniature. Hooks hung from the ceiling. On a large steel table lay a set of butcher's tools, gleaming and immaculate. And on the shelves, instead of sides of beef or pork, were large, vacuum-sealed plastic bags. The contents were unmistakable. They were human limbs. A leg neatly severed at the thigh, an arm, torso. They were labeled with a black marker in Blackwood's neat, precise handwriting. She saw a label that read C. Benson Finance Intern. Chloe. Another read M. Peters Analyst. The junior analyst who had made the costly error. The scale of the butchery, the sheer systematic evil of it, stole the air from her lungs. This wasn't just a handful of victims. This was a production line. She backed out of the cold room, her hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. She had to get out. Now. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from the kitchen doorway. She froze. Hannibal was standing there, blocking her exit. He was no longer a silent statue. His lips were peeled back from his formidable teeth, a deep, menacing rumble vibrating in his chest. His amber eyes were fixed on her, no longer intelligent and assessing, but filled with a primal, predatory fury. He knew she had seen the secret. He was the guardian of this unholy place. "Good dog," she whispered, her voice trembling. She held out a hand, a gesture of peace. The growl intensified. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, his muscles bunched, ready to spring. "Hannibal, heel." Blackwood's voice cut through the tension like a razor. He was standing behind the dog, his face a mask of cold fury. His illusion of a partnership had been shattered. He knew she had been playing him. "I am so profoundly disappointed in you, Alara," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "I truly thought you were different. I thought you understood. I understand that you're a monster," she spat, her fear giving way to a surge of adrenaline-fueled defiance. "I am a pragmatist," he corrected. "I am a shepherd of a stronger humanity. And you were to be my shepherdess. But instead you are just another sheep. Frightened, weak, and destined for the flock." He gave a short, sharp nod to the dog. "Hannibal!" The cane corso lunged. Alara screamed, stumbling backward. She grabbed the first thing she could find, a heavy cast-iron skillet from the stovetop, and swung it with all her might. She connected with the side of Hannibal's massive head with a sickening thud. The dog yelped in pain and surprise, stumbling for a moment, shaking its head. The blow hadn't stopped him, only enraged him further, but it had given her a precious second. She didn't run for the door Blackwood was blocking. She ran deeper into the kitchen, towards a heavy-duty service door she'd noticed earlier. Blackwood shouted in rage, more for the blow to his perfect animal than for her escape. As she fumbled with the bolt on the service door, she could hear Hannibal recovering, his furious barks echoing in the sterile kitchen. She burst through the door and into the cold night. She was in a small service yard behind the house. A high brick wall surrounded her. There was no way out. She was trapped. She heard the kitchen door open behind her. It wasn't the dog. It was Blackwood. In his hand, he held a long, slender boning knife from the butcher's table. His eyes were no longer stormy. They were black with a murderous calm. "There is no waste in my world, Alara," he said, advancing on her slowly. "Even your failure will have a purpose. You have such beautiful flesh. Hannibal will be eating well for weeks." She backed away, her eyes darting around for a weapon, an escape. She saw a stack of old, heavy terracotta pots against the wall. As he lunged, she grabbed one, a heavy, unwieldy thing, and threw it at him. He dodged it easily, the pot shattering on the flagstones. But again it bought her a moment. Her back hit the brick wall. It was a dead end. He was in front of her, the knife held expertly in his hand. This was it, the end of the line. Suddenly, a sound cut through the night, a high-pitched, piercing wail. A siren. Blackwood froze, his head snapping up. The siren was getting closer, rapidly. Red and blue lights began to flash and strobe against the high walls of the estate. He looked from the flashing lights back to Alara, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. "How?" he hissed. Alara allowed herself a small, triumphant, bloody smile. "The water," she said, her voice hoarse. "At dinner, I didn't drink the wine. I drank the water." He stared at her, uncomprehending. "The first glass you poured me," she elaborated, her mind flashing back to the moment, "when I asked for water instead of wine. While you were distracted by your guests, I slipped something into my glass. Not for me, for you." She thought of the small, high-tech device her brother, a paranoid security specialist, had given her for Christmas. A gift for the modern woman in the city. It was a tiny, waterproof GPS tracker and audio transmitter, disguised as a button on her dress. While feigning a sip of water, she had dropped it into the water pitcher on the bar before Blackwood had refilled his own glass. After she had seen the freezer, she had activated the audio feed on a hidden panic button. The police had heard everything. Blackwood's confession on the terrace. His threats in the kitchen. The wail of sirens was deafening now. The sound of cars screeching to a halt outside the gates. Shouted commands. Blackwood's face contorted in a snarl of pure hatred. He knew he was finished, but he could still have his final victory. He lunged, the boning knife slashing towards her throat. At that exact moment, the service door burst open again. But it wasn't Hannibal. It was Finch, the spectral butler. In his hands was a heavy, double-barreled shotgun. For the first time, there was an expression on his face. It was one of weary, profound resignation. "The game is over, Mr. Blackwood," Finch said, his voice a dry rustle of leaves. Blackwood, insane with rage, ignored him, his focus entirely on Alara. Before Finch could fire, a massive black shape hurtled past him. It was Hannibal, recovered and utterly enraged. But the dog, in its primal fury, didn't seem to differentiate between the threat to his master and the master himself. He saw only the tableau of violence. He leaped, not at Alara, but at the arm holding the knife. His jaws, powerful enough to snap bone, closed around Blackwood's forearm. Blackwood screamed, a sound of agony and betrayal. The knife clattered to the ground. The dog, his loyalty absolute, but his target confused in the chaos, began to shake his master's arm with savage force. The yard was suddenly flooded with light as a tactical police team stormed in, weapons raised. "Drop it! Get on the ground!" Blackwood, his arm being torn apart by his own beloved pet, his world crashing down around him, simply began to laugh. It was a high, unhinged sound that echoed off the brick walls as the police swarmed over him. Alara slid down the wall, her legs finally giving out, the horrifying tale reaching its bloody, chaotic conclusion. The monster was caught. The gilded cage was broken. But she knew the taste of his victory feast would never truly leave her mouth, and the silent, watchful eyes of his most loyal associate would haunt her nightmares for the rest of her life. The bone collector had finally come to collect his due, dragged down into the abyss by the very beast he had created.